Welcome back. If you're just joining us, be sure to pause the video here, check out parts 1 through 3. I will include a link in the description below. For everybody else, let's dive right in. In this segment, we're going to create our enemy droid, animate, and explode that target. Let's get started. First thing we want to do is delete the default cube. Press Shift and A, add a mesh UV sphere. Hit M on the keyboard, new collection, name this droid, and we can easily hide our light and camera until we need it. Now let's just zoom in. Let's hit 1 on the numpad to get the front orthographic view, and I want to hit N on the sidebar. If you don't have this little edit menu, then go up to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and then type in auto mirror or just mirror, and make sure that you have this auto mirror ticked. Then you can close that box and then expand this menu. I want to add 3 mirrors, and this is just going to make modeling this droid so much easier. So we're going to do the X positive, and I want to do the Y positive. So let's go ahead and do the Z. So now I only have this one quadrant that I need to modify. So right click, shade smooth, and let's tab back into edit mode. You can hit N to collapse that menu. So in this first vertice here, I want to select 1 up and 1 over, and then bring that up just to the 3rd ring. If you hold the Control key while selecting that, it'll give you the shortest path. And then I want to skip 2 and do this one here. So hold Shift and then Control, skip 2, and then do this one, Shift and hold Control. With those 3 selected, I want to hit Control B to bevel. I want to hit E and Enter, and then Alt E, extrude faces along normals, and take that on the inside. So you have something that looks like that. So with those still selected, just because it's going to be easier to do it this way, let's go ahead and add a new material. And the first material will be everything. So that's going to be our droid. Let's just name that droid. Let's choose something that is a little bit darker, and then we can come up to this material preview to see that. So now with these still selected, I want to hit Control plus to get 1 more level there. And I want to add a new color. And this one will be droid edging. I want to make that something like blue. We can come back and modify these later, but let's just do this for now. Click assign on that. Now I want to come back and I want a -1, and I just want that inner selected. Let's add 1 more material, and this one is going to be droid lights, and we want that to be white. I'm going to bring this all the way up and click assign on that. So we have something that looks like that. So now you can deselect that. Let's press Control and R, add a loop cut, and bring that down pretty close here. Then I went 3 for face select, Alt, and select this edge. E and Enter, and then Alt E, extrude faces along normals, and let's take that in. Control and plus, let's go ahead and assign that with the droid edging. And then Control minus, and let's do the droid lights. So let's do the same thing down here. K for the knife tool. Let's just come in here, and we're going to add some manual edges. After this one, I want to bring this up, and then back over. Enter on that. And then K for the knife tool again, over here, bring that up, back down, over, and over. Enter on that. Press K here, and let's bring this down. And we'll need, this one needs to move, GG, move that more center. And this one's not right, GG. Bring that down slightly. GG. Bring that down. And GG. just to bring that down. So for this one, we need another edge here so that we'll have something to select. And hit enter when you're done. Then back to the beginning. And let's just go ahead and trace this out. This is where we needed that edge. I'm going to hit enter here because I want to turn the model slightly, and then knife tool again. Come up here, come down here. So we can use the circle select tool, and I can see that actually this one needs to come down slightly. So it's a little straighter. And this one could come up slightly, and this one. You have to press GG in order to move these vertices. And a lot of this is going to be personal preference. Your droid will very likely look different than mine. Hit 3 for face select, and then C for circle select, and then roll the mouse wheel down so it's pretty small. You can press in the center of these, making it nice and easy. Hit enter when you're done for the moment, and then C to get back into it. And you see that we can very quickly select a lot of these vertices. So now what I want to do is press E and enter. Okay, we see that pattern starting to come in. Alt-E, extrude faces along normals. Let's take that in slightly. Control plus to get that second edge. Assign the edging, and then come back out here, Control minus, and then assign the lights. Then you can deselect. So we have a cool little pattern for our droid. Alright, so hit tab on that. I'm going to select the whole thing, Control and 2, just to give it some more topology. That cleans it up quite a bit. It is more expensive. If you see, I have a lot of vertices, but at the same time, if you come here, tick the statistics, you can see that I have now 61,000 triangles, 30,000 vertices. It's a little expensive. Now let's clean up our colors a little bit. So let's come back to the droid. I rather like that one. So droid edging, though, we need to grab this hex value. And we're just going to make this shine a little bit more. So we're going to scroll down here to the emission and just pop that hex value in. And let's bring the transmission value up slightly, and you can see that that changes a little bit when I do that. So we're going to do the same thing for the droid lights. Let's come down here to emission. We knew that that was just white. And the strength, we're going to bring that up, and then come here to your render properties. We want ambient occlusion and bloom. And for the bloom value, we can see if we come here, we've got quite a bit of bloom. We can change the radius and the intensity if we wanted to. We can make this the blue value if we wanted to. So we could do something like that just to give it some of that bloom. The sphere doesn't come through because I'm not using any lights. What we can do is go to Polyhaven. I'll include a link in the description below. Go to Assets, HDRIs, and just take a look around, see what you like here. Go ahead and download one. Once you've downloaded one, then resume the video. I'm going to head back to Blender. I've already downloaded mine. So what you want to do once you have your HDRI is come into this world property. Click where it shows the color and the little yellow dot. You want to click on that yellow dot. We want environment texture. And then we want to click the Open tab, navigate to where you saved your HDRI, double click to bring that in. Now when we click on the render properties, you see it's very nice and bright. What you can do is go to the render properties, come down to film, and make sure that you tick the transparent. So that will show you your model without seeing the background, which can be distracting. This next step is optional, but I wanted to include it in case you have a model that requires reducing the face count and baking textures from a high poly model to a low poly model. If you look at the model on the left, that is our low poly version. You can see it doesn't look bad even from a distance, but it lacks the overall detail compared to the model on the right. Now, what was interesting for me is that the model on the left, while it only had 485 vertices with a 512 face count, the overall file size for the finished product, because of the textures required, turned out to be a 4.6 megabyte file. So the higher face counts, in this case, the 30,000 vertices and faces, resulted in a 1.6 megabytes file size, making it more game engine efficient. When we get to the animation section, I'll be using the model on the right because it is 1.6 megabytes overall, and I don't require the need to reduce my face counts. However, if you do, you'll have the steps here to help you with your project. First thing we want to do is hit F2, rename this to Droid, and then I want to hit Shift and A, add a Mesh UV Sphere. We're going to leave that where it is for now. Let's right-click Shade Smooth. Go to the UV Editing tab. We can zoom in on both sides. Smart UV Project. For the margin, I'm just going to come up 3 just to make sure that it has enough space. Next, let's head back to the Layout tab, and we can go to the Modifiers Properties. Let's add a Shrink Rep, and we want the rep method to be Project. Subdivisions would be 2, negative and positive, and the target is going to be our droid. For the sphere, let's go ahead and rename that as Droid Low. And for the droid now, we can just tack on high and then drop our droid into our droid collection. Let's go ahead and hide our droid low. Now focus on the droid high. Do the same thing for UV editing. We'll notice here that our modifiers are not applied. So go back to the Layout tab. Hovered over the modifiers. You can use the shortcut of Control A, hit that 4 times and apply all 4. Now go back to the UV editing and you see you have a lot more topology. Hit A to select everything. We want Smart UV Project, and with the same margins, hit OK on that. If you can't see this very well, hit A and that will highlight everything. Looks like we have good clean margins. Now we can go to the Shading tab. Bring this window up. We don't need to see a lot. We just need to see a little bit for what we're working on. Let's focus on Droid Low for the moment. And we don't have any materials, so let's add a new material. We're just going to call that Droid Low. Over in the empty space, let's hit Shift and A. We want to add an image texture. Now click New. Rename this as Droid Baked. Left click and hold, drag down. We can modify both at the same time and let Blender do the math by adding ×2. Deselect alpha and click OK on that. Let's go ahead and Control C to copy this node. Now we want to go to the Droid High. We can paste this in. Make sure that you have a white line outlining this node. That means that it's selected. We're on slot 3 because this object has 3 materials, so we'll have to paste this in each slot. The last and most important thing to do is to make sure that the node is selected with that white line around it. So now we have all 4, you see the 4 there, we're using this image texture 4 times. Make sure that the Droid High text is orange and then Control click the Droid Low. So the Droid High will be darker, Droid Low will be lighter. Now let's head over to the render properties. Switch from EV to cycles, switch from CPU to GPU. We can deselect the denoise. We can bring up this noise threshold, and we're using 4096. Let's head down to the bake. I'm going to leave everything here as default and tick this selected to active. I also want to tick this cage, and for the cage extrusion, let's change that to a 1. Once you click bake, this process will take a few moments depending on your computer, so pause the video and I'll meet you back here in a second. Alright, so once that finishes, you'll have something that looks like this, and what you can do now is turn off the Droid High, connect the color to the base color. Once you have a successful texture map, you do want to save this texture. If you close Blender for some reason, it's not going to save this texture, and then you would have to rebake it. Come up here to the hamburger menu, go to Image, notice the asterisk when it needs to be saved, do a Save As, and for this, we've already named it, so we're just going to leave that as Droid Baked. Color space, I want to leave that as sRGB in this case. So go ahead, tick that Save As, and make sure that you save your project, and now you can comfortably close Blender in the event that you want it to close and reopen and reuse this texture. Let's head back to the Layout tab. Go ahead and apply that shrink wrap modifier. You can hit Control A or just apply it. You can also use Control 2 to add a subdivision surface. That's going to bring your poly count up a little bit, but it's 7,900 versus the 30,000 that we started with. So hopefully this section helps whoever needed to learn how to bake a high poly texture to a low poly model. This is the part where you'll have to make the decision if you want to continue with your low poly or high poly before we move on to animation. Now we're going to animate our object. Select the droid, come up to the object menu, come down to the quick effects, and then select the cell fracture. The source limit will be the number of pieces that you end up with, so I don't really want more than 10. Maybe 8, so I'm going to go with 8 there, and then leaving the rest as default, I'm going to click OK. This is going to take a moment to fracture your object, and then what you can do is, while they're all still selected, hit M, add a new collection, and we're just going to call this Droid Animation. Click OK on that, and that drops it nice and easily into that menu. Let's go ahead and turn off our droid collection for a moment. We can collapse that as well. We also don't need the lights and the camera collection, so we can minimize that as well. Now we're just going to be working with the droid cells, and these are each of the individual pieces that have been fractured. Next, what we want to do is pull up this timeline here, and then I don't want a whole lot of frames. I'm just going to roll the mouse wheel up until I get a good view. I don't really want to go beyond 20. Alright, so once you have a good view of your timeline, while everything is still selected, go ahead and hit the I key, and we want to set that location and rotation. That's just a nice, easy way to set frame 1 for all of your objects. Next, what you want to do is just move this over. It depends on how long you want your animation to play. You can be somewhere around 12 or 15. Let's go with 15. Next, what you want to do is just go down the line, selecting each object, and then pick a place. We want to animate with the -X. If you hover over this little gizmo, you'll see the negatives, but they're not displayed. Only the positive values are displayed by default. I want to animate with the -X in front so that it exports nicely and our animations go in the correct direction when we pull this object into gDevelop. For this one, I'm just going to hit G and bring that out, see exactly where that is. We can rotate that a little bit towards the Y. Go ahead and do the same thing for each of your objects, and then we'll set all of the location rotation points together at the end. So that actually looks pretty good to me. Because we have everything else hidden, we can box select these. Just make sure that you have all of them. And now what we want to do is hit the I on the keyboard, set that location and rotation, and now if we go back to our first frame, we see that we were able to easily set all of those at the same time. Now with all of these animated, we see that we stopped on 15 frames. Let's go ahead and change that end frame to 15 and hit OK on that. So now with all of those still selected, let's come up to the File, Export, GLB. Let's start from the bottom. We want to expand animation for this one because there's multiple animations and we don't want them playing one at a time. We want them to play together. We want to use the scene for the animation mode. So we also want to, very important, deselect this split animation by object. So those two, expand data, expand mesh, make sure you apply those modifiers if you didn't before. Include selected objects and rendered objects. Now we can go ahead and you can see my naming convention here. So I'm just going to call this Droid Hit. That was everything, so export that. Now that we have that done, we can hide our droid animation from viewport and render. Collapse that menu if you want to. Expand the droid menu, and I'm going to be exporting my droid high, so make that visible in the viewport and render. Select your object, go back up to File and Export, GLB, choose the location where you're going to save your file, and I'm going to rename mine as idle. I don't want any animations in this case. Make sure that we have selected and renderable in the include section, as well as data, mesh, apply modifiers. Go ahead and export this. And we should now have the two models, so let's head back over to gDevelop. Next, what we want to do is add a new object, and we're going to add a 3D model. Our model will be called Droid. Let's search for that model. And we want the droid idle. Click OK on that. There were no animations. We can leave everything else as default. Click Apply. Now we can drag our droid into our scene, and we notice that we do need to rotate it. I'm going to rotate on the X-axis for 90. -25 on the Y, just to tilt it towards the player slightly. And I want to bring it up on the Z. I'm going to come up, let's do 64. So if we preview that, we can see our droid in our scene now. Nothing happens because we haven't added any events yet. So let's go ahead and do that now. Now let's come over to the Events tab and come down to our Blaster section. We want to make a subcondition of this shoot because we want all of these things to be true before we do the next step. Click to add a new event and make sure that this is nested. Add a condition and search for raycast. We want the target object to be our droid. We want the source position. The source position will be where does the raycast start. And because this is a first-person shooter game, the object for the source is going to be the camera. So it'll be camera center X and camera center Y. And for the angle, we want camera angle. For the maximum distance, I want to go very shallow for testing purposes. I want to leave the X and Y variables as empty for the moment. Click OK on that. If our raycast comes in collision with our droid, we're going to delete the droid. Click OK on that, and let's test that. We can see we're probably too far, and that worked. Now that did open up another issue, and that the crosshairs are not very well aligned, so let's go ahead and fix that. I'm going to head back to the Scene tab for a moment. You won't need to do this section. I just want to do a test value so we can see exactly what's happening. So I'm going to call this Test Align, leaving everything for the size as default, tick the transparency, and I just want to create a quick object with Pascal. I'm going to use something bright that's not easily confused in my scene, so let's go with that bright yellow and bucket fill that in, calling this the same thing, Test Align, and then click Save on this object. Now I can copy this value and make sure that each of these are ticked, and then just paste it going down the line. That'll bring each of those faces in so we can see what's happening. And paste that one in as well. Now click Apply. So I'm not going to bring it into my scene because I want to create it with an event. So I'm going to head back to the Events tab. Come out here. Let's create a new event. And again, you don't need to do this part. This is just for testing. I'm going to create at the beginning of the scene. And for the value, I want to create an object, and I'm going to create this test align. I want it to be at the blaster center X and blaster center Y. And I want to create this on the UI layer. Now, values and directions are very different depending on which layer, so make sure that you choose a layer right off the bat. So I'm going with the UI layer in this case. And so what we'll see when we preview this is that it creates it at the very center of our object. Also, we could add another event and we could get the Z center as well. And so blaster center Z. You can see that it brings it in slightly, but not enough to make a difference. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that one. Now what I want to do, and because we're on the UI layer, any value that we add in the positive will go right, negative will go left on the center X. So I want to offset that just a little bit. So I'm going to do -20. We can see that that does offset it, not quite enough, but also these values very much depend on the size of your object. I wanted something wider than the blaster, so I'm leaving it as the default size. But if we were to change that, then we would have to change these values. So I'm going to test 40 and see if that corrects it. And that looks a little bit better. So now I'm at the center of the blaster, but also the Y should be adjusted. So any positive in the Y center is going to make the object go down. Any negative is going to make it go up. So I want to bring it up slightly. So I'm going to do a -150 and see what that looks like. And we can see that that is a bit high, but it looks pretty good. So because the muzzle flash is on a different layer, if I were to change to the muzzle flash layer using these same values, you see that our object is in a different place, but it does actually sit so that it would be not blocked at all by the blaster. So you probably want to use this muzzle flash layer if you were trying to align your muzzle flash or even a projectile. For the crosshairs, I can see that on the muzzle flash layer, I would have to bring everything to the right. And to achieve that, I'm going to do a positive value on the center X. So if I do +40, we can see that that brings that over quite a bit. So for the crosshairs, we can copy and paste this event and then comment out the old code, bring this value down here, and then bring this value for the Y, and then change that layer so it's not on the UI layer but on the muzzle flash layer. And also we can comment out our test code. So we can see what the crosshairs look like. It's a little too close to the blaster, in my opinion. What we can also do to add some separation for the crosshairs would be to change the Z position. That value is going to be the blaster center Z, and then we'll test a value like -400, which will make the object further away, and then test that. So you can see it does look to be better aligned. Now what we can do is increase our pixels for the raycast, and so from across the room I can easily see and hit that object. Making sure that this works, we can duplicate this item. You can hit Control and D to duplicate the item and then just move a few copies around. Now you can test hitting each one. That one's a little far. Let's see if we can get any closer. Okay, so that works out, and our crosshairs are now better aligned with our blaster. Next, what we're going to do is add our Droid Hit Animation. Click here on Add a New Object, New 3D Model. We're going to call this Droid Hit. For the model, let's select that Droid Hit GLB, bring that into our project, leaving everything as default. If you click here on scan for missing animations, don't panic. I've noticed sometimes you have to hit apply and then go back in. Now scan for the missing animations and you see it works. Rename that to hit, come back up here and make sure that we keep the object material, and now we can hit apply. We're not going to add it to our scene because we're going to use an event to add that in. Click on the Events tab. Once you're happy with the crosshairs, you can go ahead and delete that old event. For the test object, we can just drag that out here and maybe make a test group that we'll later delete. So we just want to add a new group so we don't forget later. Alright, so that's going to be my reminder that I want to eventually delete that, but I may need it later and I don't want to have to keep creating it. For the next section, we're going to create a new event and just drag down this delete the droid. We want to create a new action. For the droid hit, create an object. The X position will be the droid center X, and the Y position will be droid center Y. And we want that on the base layer. Click OK on that. We want to add a new action for our droid hit, and we want to set the Z position. That will be the droid center Z. Click OK on that. We can add a new action here to also set the animation. Choose the animation by name, and we want that to be droid hit. We can copy this event here and paste it, then set this one to droid hit, and also we don't want this event nested. We just want to bring that out one level. Let's go ahead and test this. That works as expected. That one as well, and that one as well. We're right around the 30-minute mark, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this one here. I hope that you'll join me in the next segment as we continue to refine our enemy droid animation, fix a few bugs, as well as continue to build out the overall game level. Be sure to click on the like and subscribe, as well as leave me comments below. I look forward to reading every single one and finding out how your individual projects are going. I hope this helps, and we'll see you next time.